As you can tell from the round of applause, Alice needs no introduction, but I'm going to give one anyway. It's my job, but it's also worth reflecting on the career of someone who's changed how millions of people think not just about food, but how we live. When Alice opened Chez Panisse in 1971, it was hard to find locally sourced fresh foods. American agriculture and meat production had been industrialized and commoditized. It was near impossible, food critics complained at the time, to find unfrozen chicken or an unwaxed cucumber. At Chez Panisse, Alice insisted on doing it differently, finding locally sourced fresh ingredients and helping to launch the farm-to-table movement. We often describe the slow foods movement as a movement about food, but it was really a cultural critique, a statement about healthy living and healthy society that values sustainability, collaborativeness, and human individuality over commoditization and sameness. And it's had a tremendous impact. Over the last half-century, food culture in the United States has changed enormously, not only thousands of restaurants around the country, but in millions of homes as people have sought to emulate the spirit of Chez Panisse and adopt a more sustainable, healthy approach to food and cooking and really to life. There are all others involved in this, of course, but as a food historian Joyce Goldstein wrote, Alice drove the train of the ingredients revolution. But for all the millions people who have been touched by Alice's work, we as a society have stayed in the thralls of fast food culture, especially communities have had to rely on cheap fast foods. Because of this, we'll talk about this, Alice created the Chez Panisse Foundation and the Edible Schoolyards Project, bringing organic gardening to schools and connecting students to food, nature, and each other. Alice, thank you so much for being with us today.
It's an honor to be here.
So let's dive right in. You said, in effect, that cheap foods and fast food culture end up costing our society and the world quite a bit. Tell us what you think of the costly consequences of fast and cheap food.
Well, I just wrote a book about this because I wanted to know how we could have changed our values in such a short period of time between basically World War II and now, and what happened. And I knew that it had to do with food, or I felt like it did. But when we worked on this book, We Are What We Eat, I understood that when we were eating the fast food of the 50s and we were being indoctrinated, we were not only eating food that wasn't good for us, but we were eating the values that came with the food. So we all learned that food should be fast, cheap, and easy. And food has never been fast, cheap, or easy since the beginning of civilization. And we always devoted time to cooking it and eating it and growing it, particularly. And then we learned that everything should be uniform. You know, just we want the same cappuccino here as, you know, wherever we are in the world. That idea of uniformity has really affected not just what we're eating, but how we're living. And then there's the ideas of more is better. And we wonder about the obesity epidemic when we have portion sizes that are huge. And you feel like you don't get your money's worth unless you have enough food on the plate. And then it's okay to waste. There's always more where that came from. And the idea that you can have whatever you want, whenever you want it, 24/7, basically. And this goes against all of the values, certainly that I treasure. Because when you think about food that way, you get completely disconnected to nature. And nature is the beauty in my life. And it's what restores me. And I just think I brought my own 𝐏𝐥𝐢𝐜 mandarins, not only for the beauty of them, but this is the moment of them. And the most important thing I've come to realize, particularly during the pandemic, is that Chez Panisse has been rigidly seasonal and local. Now, fast food would have you believe that this is boring and restrictive and all of the above. I want whatever I want, but I don't want whatever I want. I want food that is ripe and delicious. So when Chez Panisse began, I was looking for taste back in 1971, taste like I had experienced in France. And I couldn't find it. And I thought, well, maybe if I open a little French restaurant, I'll be able to find it somehow. And we opened that just with a group of friends that all cared about taste. But we couldn't find it for the restaurant until we found the local organic farmers and ranchers and fishers. And then we found taste. And so that is what we have practiced. And I'm just rattling on.
No, the stage is yours. But so there was actually a little vignette in We Are What We Eat, which will stick with me a long time, which was, I think on a trip to Kansas, I think, you flew in and you said, you know, I've been talking about fast food, maybe I should experience it. And you went to McDonald's, which is a delightful image. And you reported that between driving up, ordering it, and finishing the meal was about 6 minutes long. And when I read that, I said, I've had lots of meals like that. Would love to sort of, and I did not reflect upon it, but you did. So would love to sort of share that, the rest of that story and sort of what you took away from that meal.
Well, first of all, I was going to the Land Institute in Salina, Kansas, which is run by Wes Jackson. And I was going for my first board meeting. And I was a little late from the plane. And driving around town, I realized there weren't any restaurants, but I saw the McDonald's and I thought, maybe I should just go and see what this is about. And, you know, it was a drive around, grab it, and I timed it and went and parked out in the parking lot right next to a garbage can. And I was looking, I guess, for some of that secret sauce or something that really made it taste good. But it was basically about salt and sugar. And I love salt, potato chips particularly, but this didn't have anything really, it didn't speak to me at all. And I just took all my stuff and I just put it in the garbage out the window. And really it took me 6 minutes. But I had that experience confirmed by my daughter, who went to a soccer meet out in the middle of the Central Valley in California. And she hadn't ever eaten in a fast food place. And they all went to a McDonald's. And she came back and she said, oh, Mom, it tasted like nothing. I loved it. That she felt that way, but she really did. And she's got really great taste buds. And I just know that it's feeding to the addictions, the experience of salt and sugar very addictive. No question about that.
But there's another lesson in the story you just told, which was that was all you could find in, I think, Salinas, Kansas. Salina, Kansas. Sorry. That's a story of what's available. People live in food deserts. How do you democratize, popularize, broaden the conversation about healthy eating and slow foods?
Well, it's very hard to talk about health in this country because I don't believe in the industrialized medical system, and I just don't believe that health is any other place than in the ground. It's how we grow our food that's the most important part. And when I learned about regenerative agriculture, I mean, I've always been a supporter of organic for 50 years. But before that, I guess I should say I grew up in my parents' victory garden. They had that all during the war and afterwards, and they couldn't afford to feed their family of 6 unless they had that victory garden. Unfortunately, my mom wasn't a good cook, alas. But she cared about health, and she tried. We always had fruit cup for dessert and all of that. But I just know that gardens are of great, great value. And I'm wondering right now why they're not planting a garden on the front lawn of the White House, a regenerative organic garden, and feeding conceivably children in Washington, D.C. who don't have enough to eat. I keep thinking of all the land that's available in this country and owned by the government or the states that could be planted and provide food and jobs. And so in this book, We Are What We Eat, I really tried to come up with some really positive conclusions. And I kept going back again and again to public education. And that was pretty industrialized in the 80s. Kind of one size fit all. And we were training people to make money, to go to college, and if you get that degree, you can, you'll be able to do this thing. Well, it's left a lot of children behind.
So if I could ask you, school's a perfect segue, thank you for that, to your edible schoolyards project. So tell us about it and what it's doing and what you hope to accomplish with it.
Well, first of all,
you brought a prop, so that's good. So we both did.
First of all, I have to say that I was a trained Montessori school teacher. I went to England in 1968 and learned Montessori training. And I came back and worked in a preschool in Berkeley until I left and opened Chez Panisse. But I really believed in her 2 principles. She was the first female doctor in Italy back at the end of the 19th century. And she wondered how to teach children that lived in poverty and hunger. So she focused on Naples and India and did her work. And she realized that these were children that were sensorially deprived because of hunger and poverty. But we live in a country where we're all sensorily deprived. We're not touching and tasting and smelling. We're not using our hands in the way that we have in the past. I can't eat salad without using my hands. And people, and my daughter, of course, does it now. But you're eating, tasting differently when you pick something up like that. But that was very, very important. And when the principal of a middle school in Berkeley called me up and said, would you come beautify my school? I just said right away, yes. And I went over there, and it was a middle school that had 1,000 students, 6th, 7th, and 8th graders. And I said, you've got so much land here. He said it was built on 17 acres of land in 1921 for 500 students.
Wow.
But a lot of the land had been taken by the city of Berkeley to be used for tracks and all of that. But there still was a lot of land. And I just walked around with Neil Smith, and I said, I see a garden over there, huge garden on that lot. And I see digging up the blacktop there and building a cafeteria. And then I said, why couldn't we make this portable building that was no longer used into a kitchen classroom? And he said to me, you do whatever you want to do. And I said, okay, Neil, you asked for it. And so what I did was I started the Chez Panisse Foundation. We hired teachers to teach a kitchen classroom and a garden classroom, but not for teaching gardening and kitchen cooking per se, but to teach all of the academic subjects. So you go into the kitchen classroom in a history class, and you may be studying the Middle East. Well, you're going to be making hummus and pita bread, and maybe some greens, garlic. And you're going to see a map of the Middle East and see where those foods were all grown. And then you start cooking together. And this is what it's about. It's opening up the senses. And it is a class that these kids never want to miss. And in the garden, I mean, it could be an art class, it could be a music class, but it's easily a science class. And again, when you're outside, you're smelling, you're hearing the bees, you're picking a leaf, tasting it, some edible plant. And so it's engaging the kids with nature. And when they fall in love, and it's not easy. I mean, it's not easy for high school kids. It's really easy for kindergarten kids and preschool kids. It's just, you know, you roll down the hill once and you want to be outside all of the time. And that's how it was. You know, when I grew up, we never came inside ever. Of course, my parents didn't have a television, which was great until the mid-50s.
Yeah.
But it's something that is quite amazing, because we built a network for proof of concept. And so we started an edible schoolyard, one in LA first, with a chef I knew, Suzanne Goen, and she had a school she was connected with. We did one in New Orleans, in a hot place, in a different culture. We did one in North Carolina, in a museum that was based on learning by doing. We did one in Brooklyn, because we wanted to see what it was like in a big city in a cold climate. And then we went to upstate New York, and we didn't know that. Well, it worked in all these different cultures. And right now, and I have to show you this map because it has gone around the world. And it's in 6,200 schools around the world. Let's turn the other side. It's
right.
more impressive on that.
Yeah. All 6,200 there. Yeah.
Now, I haven't visited all 6,200, although I think I might do that. But what I can say about it is they are learning about stewardship of the land. They're learning about nourishment. They're learning about equity at the table and in the world. They're learning about biodiversity and building community. And I believe that they're all learning about beauty. And we say at the Edible Schoolyard that beauty is a language of care. So when you put something on the table that's beautiful and the students come in, they say, I think to themselves, somebody cares that I'm here. And it's kind of an unspoken with flowers as well. It can be anything. And just lastly, I'll say that the teacher that we hired, who's still there 26 years later, Esther Cook, had such respect for the students. And that was the key, because she, every year for Valentine's Day, she made a card for every student. She hand printed it. And she wrote, "You are loved," with a heart. And that said everything about how she taught huge respect for every child. And when you empower them in that way to use their own senses for how to season food, how to do that very basic thing. When they grow it and they cook it, they all want to eat it. And it doesn't matter what it is. If they only grow it or only cook it, 95% want to eat. And that is really the message from the Edible Schoolyard Project.
So let's do this. I want to make sure, I have a dozen more questions for you, but I want to make sure we have a chance for some questions from the audience. So why don't we see if there are questions starting in the room, mic runners. And as the mic comes over to the first question, I'll say I was in Wayne County, Kentucky about a month ago and saw, I don't know if it was an Edible Schoolyard, but I saw a garden. It was an amazing thing. Fed the kids, fed the school, fed the community. It was a beautiful thing.
I forgot to talk about my mission. It's not the Edible Schoolyard Project alone, but mine is to change the food in public education completely. And I believe if we had school-supported agriculture, where the schools became the economic engine for organic regenerative farming. Locally, it could be an economic stimulus for every state in the country. And I know that in California, this is the belief of the governor and the first partner. They want this to happen. They call it farm to school. But I want to go a step further, like we did at Chez Panisse. We bought directly from the farmers, the ranchers, the fishers, so that they got all the money. They didn't have to sell wholesale to a distributor like Cisco so that they brought it to Chez Panisse. We bought directly. And when we told everybody we were doing this, people flocked to Chez Panisse to sell to us. We have a network of probably 75 people that we buy from on a regular basis. But just think what this can do to people who make tortillas or bread or anything that the public school system needs. And it is my belief that the University of California could lead the way. They have a carbon neutrality initiative for 2025. And I asked Janet Napolitano when she was president, could food be part of the carbon neutrality? Because of course, regenerative organic food pulls the carbon down into the ground where it belongs. So this is not only about health, this is about climate. This is a way, and I guess I would like to say, the most delicious way to address climate, the only hopeful way.
Question over there.
Yes.
Yes, Alice, thank you so much for your inspiring work. My name is Susie Stadler. I'm an architect and also lead an organization called At Home with Growing Older. And I wanted to ask you if, food has a special role and the role changes in later life for people. And so one thought is, what about expanding the edible schoolyard actually to nursing homes? Because I think food, plays a crucial role, and I'm curious if you've ever thought about it. And then the other question I have, has your way of eating and cooking changed as you get older? And also, has the way you use your kitchen changed?
Very good question. I do think there should be gardens, absolutely, in every school and in every home I don't believe, actually, I believe in communes. I've always told all my friends that, my father died because he didn't have meaningful work his whole life. He lived to be 91, but he just had always been busy. And they had a victory garden their whole life, which they took care of. But I think that that's something really important. And it's why I'm thinking about a way to bring older people into the schools to help with the preparation of food, whether it's the shelling of peas or beans. All the people who work on the telephones at Chez Panisse, they get a whole pile of beans to shell while they're on the phone. But it's not just doing that work while you're answering the phones. The chefs come by and they say, "Thank you. You've done something so important for us." And they feel that gratitude. One time I put beans up on the bar at Chez Panisse and the customers started shelling beans. So I know that doing that work for a school, and when I designed the kitchen and the cafeteria for King's School, I left a place for people to volunteer to come in, and then they would have lunch with the students. And I do think it's important to have communities that are not just for older people, but I like the intergenerational connection. And it's very, very important that we include older people with their knowledge of the world and their gift to the younger.
Okay, we're going to take one more question.
Yes.
If there is one here in the room, right here, if we can run a mic over. and we'll make a few adjustments to the schedule.
Hi, thank you. I'm Cindy Gum. I'm here just from the general public as being interested. I'm so excited about what you're talking about. And I have a granddaughter who's a science teacher in a Title I school, high school in San Jose. And she has started a garden for her science class. How does a young 20-some science teacher get support and help?
That's a really good question. I mean, fortunately, we had an enlightened principal, Neil Smith, at King School in Berkeley. But it takes the really enlightened people who run the school to help to make that happen. But we told the principal, I mean, Neil, that we were going to get help from the community to make that garden. And we included them almost in a Van Gogh line of planting the cover crop. We all walked down the field and with drums to include the community. It's really, really important. But if we have this legislated at the top, if we have people who understand the importance of this in every school, and it's why I've been in Washington and with the help of Cory Booker, who understands about regenerative ag and has done lots of work with speaking in videos with the New York Times. But I would love to be in contact with your daughter.
Okay.
I will know, because we can help with that, the network that we have built in our Edible Schoolyard project.
Well, thank you. Thank you for that question, and thank you for that answer. And Alice, thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you. Thank you. I wish I had enough of these, but I'll leave them there
Well,
so
thank
you
you.
remember. She did. She was instrumental, and it's why I think it's important that we plant another garden on the front lawn, not on the back, on the front lawn, and that we talk about health and regenerative ag and climate. They could make a garden and talk only about climate if they wanted to stay out of the food conversation. But we all need to understand really that food's in the soil, and to talk about a better school lunch without talking about how that lunch is produced is completely wrong.